For B-2 Spirit stealth bombers are over Iran right now. Operation Epic Fury is in its 16th day. And as of this morning, the United States Air Force has confirmed continued heavy strikes across western and central Iran. That is not a headline. That is a confirmed military reality unfolding at this very moment. If you drive a car, heat a home, or buy groceries in America, you are already paying for this war. Brent crude closed above $100 a barrel this week. Oil prices have surged more than 40% since February 28th. The Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly 20% of the world's daily energy supply normally flows, has been effectively shut down. By the time this reaches you, the picture may have shifted again. What you need to understand right now is what the B-2 Spirit has already done to Iran's nuclear and military infrastructure, what Iran is doing in response, and why the next 72 hours could determine whether this war expands or begins to wind down. On February 28, 2026, Israel and the United States began a series of strikes against Iran. They said they aimed to induce regime change in Iran and target its nuclear and ballistic missile program. The opening blow was not a warning shot, it was a decapitation strike. On February 28, 2026, Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, was assassinated. His daughter, son-in-law, grandchild, and daughter-in-law were also killed in the strikes. Other senior officials confirmed killed include the Minister of Defense, Aziz Nasirzadeh, and the head of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, Mohammad Pakpour. CBS News reported that 40 Iranian officials had been killed in the strikes. That was day one. The campaign escalated from there. Operation Epic Fury, the U.S. code name for its joint military operations with Israel against Iran, began on February 28, 2026. The Northrop Grumman B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, the most capable deep penetration strike platform ever built, entered the fight within the first 24 hours. On March 1, 2026, U.S. Central Command confirmed that B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, flying from Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri, executed strikes against hardened Iranian ballistic missile facilities. Air Force General Dan Kane said the bombers flew a 37-hour round-trip mission from the continental United States to hit hardened targets. Think about that. Missouri to Iranian airspace and back. No forward staging, no regional base, a global strike mission flown from the American heartland. The B-2 Spirit is the only aircraft on Earth capable of delivering the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, a 30,000-pound bunker-buster bomb designed specifically to destroy deeply buried targets. Last year, during Operation Midnight Hammer in June 2025, 7 Whiteman-based B-2s led a strike on Iranian nuclear sites, dropping 30,000-pound massive ordnance penetrators that only the B-2 is equipped to carry. That operation hit Fordo and Natanz, Iran's primary uranium enrichment facilities buried deep underground. Israeli and U.S. strikes in June appear to have severely damaged Iran's 2 operating uranium enrichment facilities at Natanz and Fordo, likely rendering them inoperable. The Pentagon assessed those strikes set Iran's nuclear program back 1 to 2 years. Iran was given a window. Diplomacy had a chance. That window closed. This time, Operation Epic Fury involved 4 B-2s dropping GBU-31 2,000-pound bombs on Iranian targets. Flying global air power missions from their home base in Whiteman, Missouri, America's stealth bombers arrived over Iranian airspace in the early morning hours and targeted Iran's missile caves, facilities built deep under mountains primarily used for storage, with some having the ability to launch ballistic missiles through fissures in their ceilings. The B-2 can carry a payload of over 40,000 pounds. That could include up to 8,500-pound GBU-38 Joint Direct Attack munitions, 16 2,000-pound GBU-31J DAMs, or 16A GM-158 Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff missiles, 1 aircraft, 1 pass, an entire military installation erased. By March 6th, CENTCOM confirmed that US B-2 stealth bombers had struck about 200 targets deep inside Iran over the previous 72 hours, focusing on areas around Tehran and underground missile facilities. Iran's air defenses could not stop them. The B-2 Spirit presents an insurmountable challenge for Iran's integrated air defense network. Tehran relies on S-300 PMU-2 and Bavar 373 systems, but the B-2's flying wing design and radar-absorbent materials collapse detection ranges, especially against fire control radars. The bomber's radar cross-section is compared to that of a large bird. Against conventional aircraft, Iran detects targets beyond 100 kilometers. Against the B-2, that range collapses to a fraction. The scope of the air campaign is staggering. Within the first 72 hours, U.S. forces reportedly struck more than 1,700 targets across Iran. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said on March 13th that joint U.S.-Israeli military strikes have hit more than 15,000 targets, Revolutionary Guard headquarters, missile launch sites, command infrastructure, leadership compounds. This is not a limited operation. This is systematic dismantlement. On February 24th, 12 F-22 Raptor fighter jets were deployed to Avda Air Base in southern Israel. This was the first U.S. deployment of offensive weaponry in Israel. The F-22 Raptor, the most advanced air superiority fighter in the world, was positioned specifically to dominate Iranian airspace. Combined with the F-35 Lightning II and the B-2, the coalition assembled what analysts are calling the most comprehensive stealth air armada ever deployed in combat. Iran's Air Force possesses no modern fighter jets, relying entirely on a mix of decades-old Russian and American aircraft. There is no air-to-air contest here. There is only one side controlling the sky. The naval picture is equally decisive. Beginning in late January 2026, the United States carried out its largest military buildup in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq, deploying air, naval, and missile defense assets. On February 13th, USS Gerald R. Ford was en route to the Middle East, creating an uncommon two-carrier deployment. The Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group was already in theater. Two full carrier strike groups operating simultaneously in the same combat zone. That has not happened since the opening of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Now here is where this story turns from what has happened to what it means for you directly. Iran's effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz has significantly disrupted the global supply chain, affecting goods from fertilizers to metals to gas and fuel. Roughly 20% of global oil and gas typically passes through the strait. Shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz has virtually ground to a halt since the strikes began. This is not theoretical. This is happening now. Oil prices closed just above $100 per barrel after Iran's new supreme leader Mojtaba Khamenei vowed to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed. Oil prices have risen over 40% since the start of the war. The price of U.S. jet fuel has soared almost 60% since the closure, hitting $3.95 a gallon. That cost does not stay in the fuel tanks of military aircraft. It flows directly into airline tickets, shipping costs, and the price of everything at your local store. The International Energy Agency estimated the war will cut the global supply of oil by about 8 million barrels a day in March. The IEA called this the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. That is not a military assessment. That is an energy agency telling you the world has never seen a supply shock like this. The IEA's 32 member countries agreed to release 400 million barrels of oil from emergency reserves, the biggest coordinated drawdown since the agency was created after the 1973 oil embargo. That did little to immediately send market prices lower. The U.S. Energy Department said it would release 172 million barrels, but that delivery would take 120 days. Relief is not coming fast. Iran's IRGC says it will not allow a liter of oil through the Strait of Hormuz and that any vessel linked to the United States, Israel, or their allies will be considered a legitimate target. They are backing those words with action. 3 more foreign ships were struck in the Persian Gulf overnight. U.S. forces sank 16 Iranian mine layers as reports emerged that Tehran is mining the Strait of Hormuz. The IRGC is threatening $200 per barrel. Even if that number is posturing, the trajectory is real. Every day the strait stays closed, the pressure on the American economy intensifies. Meanwhile, Iran has not absorbed these strikes quietly. By March 5th, a military source told Fars news agency that Iran had fired over 500 ballistic and naval missiles and almost 2,000 drones since February 28th. Almost 40% of those launches were aimed at Israel, and almost 60% were fired toward U.S. targets in the region. Iran launched hundreds of drones and ballistic missiles at targets in Israel and at U.S. military bases in Bahrain, Jordan, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates. This war is not contained inside Iran. It has spread across 7 countries. The cost in American lives is already real. The U.S. military death toll stands at 13, 7 of whom have been killed by enemy fire. About 140 U.S. service members have been wounded in the conflict. 8 service members remain listed as severely injured. Among the dead are Chief Warrant Officer 3 Robert M. Marzan, 54, of Sacramento, California, and Major Jeffrey R. O'Brien, 45, of Indianola, Iowa, both killed on March 1st in an unmanned aircraft system attack at Port Shuaibah, Kuwait. 6 more died when a KC-135 Stratotanker refueling aircraft crashed in western Iraq. These are not numbers. These are Americans who deployed to the Middle East and are not coming home. Iran's new leadership has shown no sign of capitulating. Mojtaba Khamenei was elected on March 8th to replace his father as supreme leader. His first public statement demanded the immediate closure of all U.S. military bases in the Middle East and insisted the Strait of Hormuz must remain closed. The regime is damaged. It is not destroyed. Analysts point to a depletion of Iranian missile and launcher stores, as well as a strategy of rationing for a longer war. That tells you something critical. Iran is not trying to win in 3 days. Iran is trying to outlast. An Iranian official reportedly threatened to target Israel's Dimona reactor complex if the United States and Israel push for regime change. That is Israel's unacknowledged nuclear weapons facility. It is unlikely Iran could hit the facility, but any such strike could compromise the safety of the complex with significant radiological risks to surrounding populations. This is the escalation ladder no one in Washington wants to talk about publicly. If the strikes on Iran continue to deepen, the risk of a retaliatory strike on a nuclear facility becomes non-trivial. Military analysts with knowledge of Iranian doctrine understand that a cornered regime with diminishing conventional capability begins considering asymmetric options that rational actors would reject. The White House says it is winning. Spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt said the initial timeline was about 4 to 6 weeks to achieve the full objectives of Operation Epic Fury. The goals are to destroy Iran's missiles and ability to make them, destroy their navy, permanently deny them nuclear weapons, and weaken their terrorist proxies. Defense Secretary Hegseth pledged to keep advancing with no mercy for our enemies. But the war is already testing the assumptions it was built on. The expanding war effort has uncomfortable echoes of the Iraq War, where tens of thousands of U.S. troops on the ground were not enough to end the violence for nearly 9 years, though no one in power is talking openly about sending troops into Iran. The question military planners are asking privately is the same one every American should be asking. If Iran does not collapse in 4 to 6 weeks, what is Phase 2? Nobody has answered that publicly. Early on March 15th, heavy airstrikes were reported in the Isfahan area, along with 20 explosions near Shiraz, heavy explosions in southern Tehran, Dezful Air Base, Khomeini, and Hamadan. The waters off Iran's coast have become a strategic battleground, and the U.S. bombed military targets on Iran's Karg Island. Karg Island handles the vast majority of Iran's oil exports. The message is unmistakable. If Iran keeps the strait closed, America will tighten the economic noose on Iran's own revenue lifeline. As of this moment, the trajectory points toward sustained escalation, not resolution. The B-2 Spirit has already penetrated the deepest, most hardened sites Iran ever built. Carrier strike groups dominate the surrounding waters. F-22s own the airspace. More than 15,000 targets have been hit, but the Strait of Hormuz remains closed. American service members continue to take fire, oil prices continue to climb, and Iran's new supreme leader has sworn publicly to hold the line. The single indicator to watch in the next 48 hours is whether the U.S. Navy begins escorting commercial tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. Energy Secretary Christopher Wright said escort operations could begin by the end of the month. He told CNBC that Washington was not ready to provide escorts yet. If that timeline moves forward, it signals the Pentagon believes it has suppressed enough of Iran's anti-ship capability to risk commercial traffic. If it slips, it means the strait stays shut, oil prices keep climbing, and every American feels it at the pump and the grocery store. That is the number that tells you whether this war is being won, or whether it is just beginning to exact its real cost. Watch the strait. That is where the next chapter of this war will be written.